Customs evaluation policy fueling smuggling. Motor dealers cry out. And then at leadership Twitter spaces, CSOs ask federal government to implement Waste report. Now the lead story comes with a kicker as 2023 campaign begins in 23 days. Nigerians seek competence above party, religious and ethnic considerations. Nigerians seek competence above party, religious and ethnic considerations. There are a number of riders to that say next president must be competent, healthy, and of good character. Now we want leaders who can get this nation out of the woods. No threat to next year's elections, IGP assures Nigerians. And you have the illustration there on the front page, how Nigerians are likely to vote in 2023. Well, the elections are still many months away in February next year. But more interestingly, so what Nigerians want incoming government to tackle: insecurity, economic hardship, decayed education sector, unemployment, bad roads, epileptic power supply, and corruption. And then just one piece from the left-hand side there, it says Kenya's Supreme Court to rule on presidential election dispute today. So those are the stories from the papers. Virtually nothing of tremendous interest for discussion.
Okay.
I don't know. The stories are just basically the ones we have. Basically.
Yeah, we can talk about this no threat to Nigeria's 2023 elections. The IGP assures UN police chiefs and the assurance that they will help support the Nigerian police during the election. I think that's a good move, actually.
It's a good move, but the assurance should not be to outsiders. The assurance should be to insiders. Nigerians where the stakeholders are in the meantime. So then, of course, law enforcement is important, and having to ensure that there's a proper atmosphere, suitable atmosphere for the conduct of the polls will be critical to the credibility of next year's elections. The other story about NNPC saying they are ready for forensic audit of fuel supplies. I think that this is, of course, in response to the widely reported comments made last week by the Comptroller General of Customs while appearing before the Committee of the House of Representatives on Finance. And the Comptroller General of Customs raised pertinent questions about the figures normally allocated to fuel supplies and the claims about smuggling. And he then raised the questions: how many trucks are required to smuggle 38 million liters of petrol every day, and then can the numbers be constant? This is the quantity of fuel you supply every day. Those are pertinent issues that he raised, and all those claim of readiness to undertake or be willing to subject yourself to forensic audit of. I think Nigerians are basically tired of all these forensic audits. Just do the right thing. That's the pertinent. That's the most important thing. And as the Comptroller General of Customs said, what are the numbers that we're actually dealing with? And more importantly, how many vehicles do we have in Nigeria that use petrol? How many vehicles? We are told that about 50% of the vehicles that we have in Nigeria can be found in the Lagos-Ogun axis of the country. So Kano is populated, Port Harcourt also uses, and you find uses also in the south. But what is our daily consumption of PMS?
Well, NNPC is insisting 68 million liters.
But can it just be every day? Every day you consume 68. Do you buy fuel every day?
No, I don't.
I don't buy fuel in my car every day. I mean, even those who are transporters, how many of them are on the road every day and topping up their tanks virtually every day? So, but the whole issue relates to, look, what are we doing about smuggling? What is it that we are doing about the huge subsidy payments? And that's where the outgoing is from the national purse. And besides, if we were producing fuel locally, if we were refining fuel locally, all of these questions will be virtually immaterial.
Yeah, it will be addressed indeed. I think, like Kingsley said, not much to talk about in the papers today. We'll take a break. When we return, our conversation will begin. Don't go away.
When you wake up in the morning before you start your day, breakfast time is time. For work and for play, for a great start to your day. Breakfast time is time.
Always start our day with a nourishing Kellogg's breakfast, powered with the goodness of grains and 11 essential vitamins and minerals. Kellogg's makes a great tasting breakfast for all of us.
Breakfast time is Kellogg's time.
Bye, Mom.
He's going to play in this weather. Why did you let him go? He might fall ill.
And if he doesn't go out for practice, how will he win more trophies? To protect our family from illness-causing germs during the rainy season, we use Dettol soap every day.
Dettol with germ defense gives you protection. Rainy season brings a lot of germs, and Dettol soap's germ defense protects you from up to 100 illness-causing germs. Dettol soap is endorsed by the Nigerian Medical Association. Be Dettol soap.
Wait. Mama T, wetin COVID vaccine poster they do for your domot? Abi, you don't begin work for those people.
Big mommy, na me put the poster there. Our teacher say COVID-19 vaccine dey safe well and it go protect you, me and all our family from COVID-19. Our teacher sabi road o, big mommy. Make you follow who know road.
My name is Dr. Chinonso Egemba. Then they call me Aproko Doctor. The COVID-19 vaccine now ogbonge way to take protect you and your family from wahala, sickness and death from COVID-19. Or you have to get your own free COVID-19 vaccine. Sharply go any healthcare facility way near you.
Join us to stop crude oil and product theft at production sites, on the pipeline, at terminals, at the depots, on vessels, at refineries. Help stop crude oil and product theft. Report infringements to www.stopcrudetheft.com. You can also validate genuine purchase at validate.stopcrudetheft.com. Please report and be rewarded. This message is from the Nigerian National Petroleum Company NNP.
As the 2023 elections draw near, remember, evil prospers when good men and women only wish for peace, but never take a step to make peaceful elections happen. Are you a father? Are you a mother? What are you saying to your children as elections approach? Have you warned them not to let themselves be used to cause violence? Have you explained to them what the consequences of electoral violence might be? Do your part to make peaceful elections happen. Talk to your children. Protect them from unscrupulous politicians who want to put them in harm's way, while their own children are comfortable at home, within and outside the country. Let's join hands to make 2023 elections peaceful. This message is from the National Orientation Agency, NOAA.
I dodge ammo.
Obi, what exactly are you dodging?
COVID now.
You are very funny. Is this how you have been dodging every cough and sneeze?
Yes, my guy. The thing don't serious.
Have you taken your COVID-19 vaccine?
Leave that matter for Matthias. I have heard plenty things like...
Beggy, I have taken my complete dose of the vaccine, and as you can see, I am okay.
Why you come still dey wear mask?
To protect everyone from getting the virus, it's good to dey practice the protective measures as the vaccine work now to stop you from dying from the COVID-19 infection.
This your explanation makes sense.
Go and get your COVID-19 vaccine. It is available in most public health centers and some approved private hospitals.
COVID-19 vaccines are safe and effective. Protect yourself and loved one. Take the vaccine. Stay alive. Let us all celebrate safely and responsibly.
Obi the Dodger.
Abejo, I'm going to get vaccinated now.
This message is from the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Information, NCDC, NPHCDA, and partners.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. As a prompt for our conversation, which is on Rethinking University Autonomy, let's listen to this background report put together by our correspondent, Abdusalam Jibril.
From extension, it has become an indefinite strike by the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU, which has lasted for over 6 months now. For students who bear the brunt of the lingering strike, the boredom is overstretched and they just want to go back to school. The ongoing strike by ASU has engendered conversations on issues that include university autonomy, governance structure, and funding. In the area of autonomy, some experts have stressed that university autonomy and funding is an important aspect in university-level education due to its impact on graduates' competencies and on the quality and quantity of research produced. They maintain that once upon a time, university education in Nigeria was not associated with the problems of autonomy and control. But by the 1970s, the calls for autonomy became stringent and the search for autonomy has become a long drawn-out worry for government-owned universities, with every effort aimed at securing autonomy, particularly in the area of academic freedom. In other climes around the world, there are different autonomous funding systems available to universities that includes government funding, funding from industries and private companies, funding from non-profit organizations, foundations or donations, and international funds coming from foreign government or funding agencies. In Nigeria, majority of the government-owned university rely on government for their funding. Some education experts have argued that the lack of autonomy in the nation's universities contributes to the inability of the university system in realizing the principal business of the university education, which is the development of academic contents, teaching, and research. Will autonomy for Nigerian universities be a solution to the recurring industrial actions in the university system? How can Nigerian universities achieve autonomy towards improving the educational system? These issues and more will form the crux of discussions as guests speak to issues of rethinking university autonomy on the program shortly.
And we have guests to discuss the topic. Let me introduce here in Abuja studio Professor Yakubu Aboki Ochefo. He's the Secretary General Committee of Vice Chancellors of Nigerian Universities and also Secretary General Committee of Post Chancellors of Nigerian Federal Universities. It's a pleasure to have you join us.
Pleasure is mine.
Okay, we're expecting a guest in our Benin Network Center. He will be there shortly, we understand, but once he arrives, we will introduce him. Now, part of this conversation, we are having via Zoom Professor Christian Anieke. Professor Anieke is the Vice Chancellor of Godfrey Okoye University in Enugu. Professor Anieke, it's our pleasure to have you this morning.
Thank you for inviting me. Good morning, Nigerians.
All right, so gentlemen, let's begin this conversation this way. Happily, we had Professor Ochefo with us on Friday when we discussed aspects relating to the lingering strike, and there were a number of matters that were thrown up, including issues around university autonomy, because autonomy and governance and the structure and governing council resolution of crisis within the university system before they become a blowout, such as we frequently have with ASU going on strike almost every academic session. These are matters we would like to focus on whether the current level of autonomy that Nigerian universities have is adequate and what needs to be done. Let's begin with Professor Ochefo. Professor Ochefo, we know there was a time there was a campaign for autonomy for Nigerian universities, and then that, of course, that campaign was won. But it would appear that the autonomy that public universities have in Nigeria is largely in name only. So tell us what happened and what is happening.
Thank you very much. The fact of the matter is that the whole principle of autonomy is factored on the law establishing the university. It is in that law that the objectives of the university, the philosophy of the university are all enshrined. And the laws establishing the federal universities in Nigeria take their origin, their historical origin from the British universities. The British universities in turn also take their own origin, from the first set of teacher-led universities. When the university tradition started, it started as a guild of students. A number of students will come together and invite professors to come and teach them. But the students set such high standards, and the professors felt, or the teachers, which were largely monks, felt that those standards were not appropriate. So a number of professors now got together and set up their own guild of professors, So you had professor-led universities, and over time, the ones that were founded by students dropped by the wayside. So that tradition has been on for like about 900 years, where you see the university vested in the guild of professors who are the ones who drive the whole system. Now, so our law, the laws establishing Nigerian federal universities, from the first university that was established by the colonial government, and the first university that was established by the Federal Ministry of Education, and the first university that was established by the Eastern Regional Government, these were the first set of universities in Nigeria, had a semblance of this professor-led university system, and that law, the law that establishes them, derives its strength from there. And basically what it says that the university can award degrees, can do this, can do a plethora of things. But by and large, how does the university support its operations? That is where our current laws vis-a-vis the autonomy of the university stands on one leg. The funding of public universities, especially the ones owned by federal government, are driven largely by subventions and grants from its proprietor. In the private universities, the tuition is a critical component of the funding of those universities. So up until the late 80s, early 90s, the core issue of autonomy that the academic staff union struggled with was the appointment of principal officers of the university, especially the vice chancellor. And the matter became so vexatious that it became a major pillar, a major point of focus for ASU. And that had to do with the fact that once the selection exercise takes place, the final nominees end up with the visitor to the university, who is the commander-in-chief, the president and commander-in-chief. And the visitor had a short list of 3 persons, and he could choose any of the 3. And it was President Obasanjo who now said, I get a list of 3 people. I don't know who they are. I mean, the people who are supposed to have done the selection exercise know better than me, but I'm now supposed to take any 3. And then, when it comes to appointment, all manner of pressures come into place, and all manner of lobbying takes place, all manner of blackmail takes place. You then select somebody. Since the law says you can take any one of the 3, maybe the guy who came highest is not taken, and the person who came second or third is taken, and then it triggers into crisis in the university system. And also said that wasn't healthy. So it was Obasanjo who now amended the law that says the governing council of the university can now appoint the chief executive. But the corollary to the appointment of principal officers was the funding. And that is where the issue of autonomy that you mentioned now becomes very critical. Where do you get your funding from? 90% subvention by government to pay your salaries, capital grants by government, user charges that the universities then ask the students to pay for electricity, for accommodation, for water, and things like that, and then donations and grants from local, international bodies, as the case may be. Now, In addition to the subvention by federal government agencies like TED Fund, like NCC, like NITDA, like Petroleum Development Fund, PTDF, also support the public universities. So when you aggregate all this together, you now see the bulk of where the monies come from. But the fundamental difference between the public universities and the private universities is that tuition fee. That between federal government, there's a proviso that says you do not charge tuition, and so you don't have that critical component being part of the fee structure of the public universities, whereas you have that in the private universities. So when we talk about autonomy, and you say, for example, the governing council that represents the interest of the proprietor, in this case, the federal government is free to appoint the leadership of the university, is free to make laws for the university, and then at the same time, it is not free to generate funds for the university as it deems fit. Then you have a problem with that level of autonomy. It's not free to appoint staff as it deems fit. As it is now, all federal universities cannot appoint any iota of staff without clearance from the office of the head of service. You must get clearance from the office of head of service before you appoint a driver in a federal university, as it is now. So where does that leave you, for autonomy that says on the other, by the law, that you can hire and fire your staff, So you cannot pay your staff the salaries that you deem fit. So we have a centralized spot, whether you are in Maiduguri or you are in Lagos or you are in Makurdi or whatever, the salary structure is uniform. So if you have staff that have done over and above the basic requirements, you cannot pay them any preferential salary, because all that again is also determined by one central body. So the salaries of vice chancellors, the salaries of principal officers, all of them is fixed by government, because these are, so you have on the one hand government saying you are autonomous, but on the other hand there are wider variables that limit that autonomy to just certain things.
No, is it the government? I mean, Jim, I know you want to come in here. Is it government that says, the law says?
The law says.
Yeah, that
the law, government is the law.
This is part of this was part of the agitation for many years, as Professor Chefu has explained. I mean, just take it from there, Jumai.
Yeah, exactly. I was just trying to have a comparison between how universities were run in the 70s, in the 60s, compared to how it's run now. Would you say, in your own opinion, that universities back then had more autonomy?
Of course, they had more autonomy. They had more autonomy. I attended University of Calabar. Professor Yandele was my vice chancellor. If he went to the United States for a conference and met an academic who he felt should be a necessary member of his faculty, he could give him a temporary appointment. Once he looks at his CV and he could give him a temporary appointment. And the person will resume, and then they will go through the procedure. And if the procedure, after 3 months, 6 months, they find that the man is competent, they regularize his appointment. Because part of the job of the vice chancellor is to headhunt for the best faculty. The faculty is the rock of the university. So if you went somewhere and you met somebody who was competent, and you feel that type of person should be, you give him a job. So they had that autonomy. They could decide a lot of things. It's true that they also function under the purview of the regulatory body, which is the National Universities Commission, that says, for example, you cannot recruit more administrative staff than academic staff. You cannot recruit more professors than graduate assistants. There was a staff-student ratio that was worked out based on the capacity of the university. So all those guidelines were there, and once you work within the framework of those guidelines, we're okay. But here we are, fast forward, government is saying all the salaries, of course, at that time, each university paid its own staff salary. From the government gave you a subvention, you use that subvention to determine your salaries and overheads, and your bursary department prepared the payrolls and paid. But now you have a situation where every staff of the federal university is paid from the IPPIS pot, because government says it wants to know who are staff and how they get paid, you know.
Okay, Professor Chefu, thank you very much. Let's bring in Professor Christian Anyeke. Professor Anyeke is with us via Zoom. Of course, Professor Anyeke, we know that there are differences in terms of the autonomy speak between public and private universities. But of course, you've been through the academia. So what does university autonomy entail?
Yeah, I think the Autonomy Act of 2004 and amended specified that it's about self-governance, it's about self-reliance, it's about self-control, it's about self-determination of universities. And as Professor Ochefu said, it's just part and parcel of university life. It is the essence of university. Without autonomy, without the power to govern itself, without the power to do its own business, it is no longer university. The university has three statutory functions. One is research, two is teaching, and three is community service. And if the university doesn't have the capacity to do this in its own way, with its own initiative, with its own innovativeness, then it is no longer a university. It's about our understanding of university. What baffles me is how we actually go against the law of a nation. There is an act. There's an act. There's a law on this. And the law is set aside and the things will continue as if a law does not exist. Then you ask yourself, why the National Assembly? Why do we pay people to make laws, and why do we approve laws that we will never respect and all that? In the private university, of course, it's a different ball game. You have the proprietary private university, a board of trustees, and they have a governing council. But you see, like in our own university, Godfrey University, you see that the university does its business without any form of interference. The university decides what it's going to charge the students. The university decides where it's going to be looking for money and all that. And that's how it can actually guarantee autonomy, independence of thinking, independence of research, independence of its activities in terms of community service and all that. So this is actually what it is. I do hope that we fight the evil from the root. The evil is that the university autonomy in federal institutions and state institutions, that this autonomy has been tampered with. The strike should target that. The fight should be taking government to court on this issue of interfering with the autonomy of universities. That's actually where the thing is. That's the bedrock of all the evils bedeviling the federal institutions. See how much time has been wasted and all that. It's not about, it's simply not about the structure of the university or government not doing it. It's about the fundamental issue of autonomy. If this is not guaranteed, then, of course, nothing works. We're going to continue to have strikes in the university. The federal university should have the freedom, with the approval of the governing council, to charge fees, to look for funding, to recruit people, to know the number of professors it needs, to invest in research, to invest in community service and all that. It should not be interfered with by any force in society. If this issue of autonomy is not addressed here, our universities will be just radical of what a university should be.
Okay, the experts say that autonomy sort of prevents, forced loyalty to the party in power or, political consideration. Would you say, in your own opinion, that politics has sort of, played a role in ensuring that the universities are not fully funded because of the appointments, coming from the political sphere?
Can I get that question again? The network is not quite...
What I'm trying to say is that, would you say that the politics has played a role in ensuring that the autonomy of the universities in Nigeria, federal universities, government owned, is not fully implemented?
Yes, of course, that everything in this country revolves around politics. We don't actually have a system that is a kind of superstructure over and above politics in a nation. It is about the political class in many civilized worlds. you don't have this kind of superstructure where politics determines everything. Politics are set aside the civil service, every other organ of society. That is it. It's just a reflection of what is happening in other sectors, not just in the field of education. Where I don't know how we came to the point that everything revolves around politics and all. But I want to believe that the university should have the capacity to bring down this kind of structure where politics actually decides what happens, even goes against the laws of the nation and nothing happens. It's all about politics, and you see it everywhere, whether it's religion or in anything, social structure and all that, civil service, is everything revolves around, and that shouldn't be. There should be a system that works, a system that is a kind of superstructure that politics bows down to, and not the politics, whether the political setup is intelligent or not. It decides whether society will continue, whether society will live. So to bring down this kind of structure of politics determining everything in society will be the task of the next generations of Nigeria.
Professor Adeke, thanks. Let's pause you and come back to Professor Ochefu here in the studios. Professor Ochefu, Professor Adeke has raised some issues, and I would like you to respond to those issues. Namely, there is the law that guarantees university autonomy, and the elements of the autonomy include self-reliance. But it appears, if not that it is actually the case, that law is not being fully respected. What is not gelling well with regard to full obedience to the prescription of the law with regard to autonomy?
Very, very, very cogent question that hits the nail at the head. So you have the law, like he has said, the 2004 as amended University Miscellaneous Law. And you have circulars that come from agents of government that are also acting on the law. You have interventions from third-party actors that are also acting based on their law. For example, you have professional bodies who come and say to universities that the law requires that they should determine how students that are going to graduate into their own profession should be trained. You get the point I'm making?
I understand what you're saying. And we know that. There's medical profession.
Yes, the medical all of the engineers, yes. They come in there.
Yes.
And the university say to them, the university say to them, wait, when we graduate these students, subject them to your professional exams. If they pass, they become your members. But we can work together and say, we can sit down together and agree on the type of things you want to see in the curriculum that will help them in the field when they come there. But to insist that we must do this, or that members of your profession must be heads of department and things like that are all not part of our purview. Then they flash the law approved by the National Assembly that they are acting on this law. Salaries and Wages Commission are backed by law to determine salaries of public servants. Federal Character Commission is backed by law to determine the composition of staff in the universities. So everybody comes with his own version of the law and says, you, university, are not operating within the ambience of the law. So we have conflicts, in the determination and interpretation of these laws that make it difficult for the universities to function. As it is now, for you to employ staff in the federal university, you have to get permission from Office of the Head of Service. In some cases, they will say, you want to replace professors that are retiring. And they say, the salaries of professors are too expensive. Go for lecturer 2. And you try to explain to them that the lecturer 2 cannot do the job of a professor. Worst case scenario is senior lecturer, but not a lecturer 2. You have that argument. And then once they approve a list, the Federal Character Commission will now say there is not enough spread in your composition of staff. The staff is squared towards this direction or towards that direction. So everybody is coming from the perspective of the law. So I think part of what Professor Anike said that it's also interesting is that probably it is time for us to test these laws, and their interpretation at the judicial level to say who is doing, because the law establishing the university, for example, vests the power of so many of these things in the Senate. But Senate is not able to function because there are other bodies that come and say they are the ones that are supposed to do this, help you do this for you, and it does not add up at all. So maybe time has come for us to go and test the thing in the law courts and see who is doing right and who is doing wrong.
Well, Jumai and Professor Professor Chefu and Professor Aneke, I'm sure you heard what Professor Chefu said. Part of what we are dealing with, it appears, is constraining full autonomy for public universities is one, if you may, the internal inconsistency within the laws establishing the universities themselves. And I say this, for example, if the University of Lagos Act 1962, now the University Miscellaneous Act of 2004, of course, amends that law, as with other federal public universities, and now grants autonomy to the University of Lagos Act of 1962. But that grant says on the one hand, look, you are free, self-reliance, X, Y, Z, and so on and so forth to do whatever you wish to do. But at the same time, your freedom to do whatever you want to do is constrained by the lingering federal government disposition not to charge tuition fees in federal public universities. Is that correct, Prof?
It is correct.
Okay. And then that is on the one hand.
On the one hand, yes.
So on the one hand, you have internal inconsistencies. That is to say, between the amending legislation and what you refer to as the principal legislation.
Yes.
Then the bigger issue has to now do with, as we lawyers will say, subsidiary legislation, which will come by way of all those circulars you are talking about and so on and so forth. That's another issue. The third one will now come also from the provisions in several other provisions of the laws establishing several other bodies. For instance, Federal Character Commission. That NUC, whatever, the professional bodies that have the equivalent of being chartered, for instance, the equivalent, the Council of Legal Education, COREN, for instance, Nigerian Medical and Dental Council will say, no, this is what you must do. So they are constrained. So you have three levels of challenges, if you may. Am I correct?
You're correct, very correct.
All right,
very
so
correct.
Thanks. So we will begin to unpack each of these things and then see how they square. We have another guest who is going to join us for this conversation. We earlier indicated that he will be with us. Professor Ibrahim Garba is joining us from our Benin Network Center. Is the former Vice Chancellor of Ahmadu Bello University in Zaria. Professor Garba, I don't know what you are doing in Benin, but let me tell our viewers that anyone who needs expertise in mining and solid mineral issues, of course, will tap into your base of knowledge. We don't have solid minerals in Benin City per se. We have oil and gas, but in Edo North, yes, you do have solid minerals there. Professor Garba, we're not discussing mining this morning. We're discussing university governance. It's a pleasure to have you with us on the program this morning. Looks like there's an audio challenge. We could see Professor Garba smiling, which means he could hear us. Are the engineers sorting that out? Do we give them some time? If I get that information from our director, we go over to Professor Aneke, who is still with us via Zoom. Is Professor Garba all right now with his audio? All right, Professor Aneke, again, let's return to you with regard to the three issues that are hobbling autonomy in public universities. Internal inconsistencies in the legislation, establishing those universities, the impact of subsidiary legislation, circulars, and so on and so forth, and provisions in the laws establishing a number of agencies and bodies that now seek to also interfere with the operations and activities of universities, thereby constraining their autonomy. What is your take on this?
It is very important also to address these inconsistencies, as Professor Chairful pointed out, and as also reiterated. We have the bodies that can actually address this. We have the Senate, of course, and we have the courts. The different levels. Of course, the Supreme Court will have the last word on the interpretation of the laws of the nation. Because when you fight, and then you realize that you are fighting on something that actually is very inconsistent, because the fight becomes a little challenging. So I think effort should be directed to resolve these inconsistencies, the different laws, laws established in university, laws of different organs and all that, and trying to that will be I said it before, that is going to be the direction. And I don't know whether the universities will have the courage to do this. They have courage to take all the issues to the National Assembly, the Senate precisely, or to court if there's need to do so. Because that's actually where the problem is. That we have all these inconsistencies, and these organs will normally put their own law and say, well, this is the law, your autonomy, and then this is our own law also. And then you have difficulty in trying to know which one is actually the right thing to do. So the Senate, the courts should be able to help us to know where the university actually stands. But I want to believe, as it is in many nations, that the autonomy of universities supersedes every other thing. I want to believe that. As the university is the highest institution of learning in any nation. And when you interfere with this, then you interfere with the whole nation. Tell me the quality of your university, and I will tell you the quality of your nation. So, in the presence of this plethora of laws, we should be able to give the university its promise in determining content of knowledge, research, and the quality of community service in a nation.
Christian, we'll get back to you. Let me come back here to the studio. Prof, we've talked about factors militating against autonomy of universities in Nigeria, and students not paying tuition fee in the federal universities. Can you break it down for us, the actual cost of university education, and is this sustainable without funding from the government itself? Will it be sustainable? How can these universities generate their funding?
Yeah, in global climes, public universities are funded with direct subventions from governments or tuition fees that are charged by students, but are predicated on support for indigent students who are not able to pay the fees. The first question he asked, how much does it actually cost? Yeah, NUC has worked out those costs. Other agencies have worked out the cost. Committee of Vice Chancellors have worked out the cost. You know, all we need to do now is to update it to take care of current inflationary measures. The first major person who worked at that course was Professor Peter Okebukala when he was NUC Executive Secretary. And he says we need to know a student studying medicine in a university at the 100 level, what is the cost? The cost for 100 level is not the same with 200 level, and as you make progress, because you transit into several areas. So that cost is there, we know it, it's established, it's expensive. As at the last time we checked, it was like about 2.2 million for medicine at the 100 level.
Per session?
Per session, yes. And that is just the tuition for alone. Then you have other levels of costing, which has to do with the user charges, accommodation, feeding, internet access, security, and all those things. You aggregate those costs. Then you now come to living cost for the students, because the student again also has to survive, like I said last time I was here, 210 days in a year on campus. You know, he has to feed, you know. So you have indigent students, you have regular students, and you have well-to-do students. So the well-to-do students is a student who has a smartphone, a high-end smartphone. An indigent student will be one who does not have a phone at all or has a touchlight phone, and they're all in the same environment. An indigent student will probably eat 1 meal a day, and an affluent student will eat 3 meals in a day. This type of distinction is global. It's part of the history of the university tradition, So you have students who come from well-to-do families that are sent to the universities. They live big. You in the university, you know what I'm talking about. And then you have students who pay their way through school. Who walk their way through, yes, they walk their way through school. So it's something that we do. So what government then does is to say, okay, we're able to support these students who are indigent. We're able to say, okay, we'll give you a bursary, we'll give you a scholarship, full scholarship or part scholarship. But if you are intelligent and you are indigent, you will not be denied accommodation. The big universities in the world, the Harvards, the Yales, the MITs, have that structure. If you get admission and you are not able to pay their fees, they will look for support from one place or the other for you. So, but here we have a situation where there is an ideological thinking that, especially from the academic staff union, that if you charge fees, they are going to deny a lot of Nigerians the opportunity to go to school. So federal government should look for alternative ways of funding education to say, do not charge tuition. Other user charges are available, but tuition don't charge. You can support this 2.2 million we're talking about, you can get it. So what we are now saying to government is, no problem. If you don't want to charge tuition fees, pay the universities the exact cost of providing university education for the number of students that you can afford. So if by your manpower planning process, you need 5,000 engineers and it costs 10 billion to train 5,000 engineers, you write a check for 10 billion to the universities that you have nominated to train 5,000 engineers for you. But to come and say, okay, all lump sum apparel, for example, at the 2022 budget, I think it was 322 billion that federal government allocated for overheads for all the 45 plus federal universities, 322 billion or something like that. 6.1 billion for capital grants and then 25 billion for overheads. Overheads includes power. University of Lagos alone spends 1.6 billion naira on power. Per annum. Ditto Ahmed Bello University. Diesel costs to run generators in Bayero University, Kano, you can call Professor Sagi and ask him. It's about 50 million a month. So what is being given to the universities by government via their subvention is like less than 20% of what they require. So universities are supposed to do research. They're supposed to do look for monies from other sources. But the argument that is being made is that in this cost-sharing situation between government and parents and their students, that percentage should move up from like about 3% that is currently to even 10% to help improve the facilities that the universities have to be able to deliver on their mandate of quality education for their students.
Okay, Professor Chefu, thank you very much. I want to return to the issue of autonomy and how that can then impact the funding structure and funding issues that you've also talked about. We touched on them last Friday on this conversation. We understand now that the audio connection from Benin has been cleared up by our engineers. Professor Garba, if you can hear me, and of course we can also hear you, then you take this question. And by the way, let me make a correction. I was saying earlier that I didn't know what we were doing in Benin because there are no solid minerals in Benin. I'm sure some persons are going to argue that we have a lot of clay in Benin, and you need clay for the production of tires and so on and so forth. And I remember one point you made at a meeting about a year or so ago now, when you defined the real meaning of mining, that what is mining is what you mine is not used by you, by yourself, but it is used by others. I believe that is still correct, if I remember that. Probably call me a C for that recollection. But Prof. Garba, we're dealing with how to rethink the autonomy of public investors in Nigeria against the backdrop of persistent ASU strike and some of the core issues that often don't get to be addressed. Is the current autonomy structure working for our public universities? And if so, what is wrong with it?
Thank you very much. I think for me, we need to clear our minds and have very proper understanding of the fact that when you talk about autonomy of a university, it's not an absolute thing, to be honest with you. It has to be specific. It has to be put in context, and we should know limitations. Why? Because, you know, for any sector that operates in any country and within any human endeavor, it has to be regulated. So to what extent you get your autonomy is to the extent that you respect the framework of the regulations that determines the sustainability of that sector. So what I mean by that is that if we were in education business, first of all, there must be a national education agenda, philosophy, you know, and aspirations in which anybody that operates within that framework, or within that sector, should aspire to, should conform to. So what I mean is that if you now aspire to have an autonomy, now what autonomy for what? Nobody will give you autonomy to do whatever you want. No university on earth has total autonomy. We can go to all other climes and discover that whoever owns the university, government, private, would have reasons for putting that university, and will have some sense or some means through which their goal or aspirations are met by that university. So in our own case, for example, when we say we want autonomy, of course we have autonomy. For example, now the government has given us some level of autonomy to our governing councils to be in charge of our affairs of university in terms of taking care of our finances, to the extent that the finances are also given by government significantly. And then our freedom also, for example, by the council to appoint vice chancellors and other principal officers. So this autonomy, this freedom that we're talking about, always have to be put in context. So we have to, and it's going to be an evolving issue. For example, now, how much autonomy do we have? How much more do we want to get? And for what purpose and for what reason? You know, even private universities don't have the autonomy that we think they should. I compare this autonomy matter to our political confusion in Nigeria when you now have a federal republic and then we run a unitary system of government. And then people now begin to agitate all the time, and that we want that semblance of autonomy to the constituent regions that make up the federation. So this autonomy in Nigeria is still being evolved, is still being understood, and so we need to really continue to take it one at a time, gain one, consolidate it, use it well, and then go for more, really. So, for example, I had your discussion about the concept of financial autonomy. If you give the universities autonomy now, financially, first of all, I tell you, practically all cannot survive. You know, even the government grants that are given, like my colleagues are saying, are not enough in any way. The parents are either they are unwilling or they are unable to also bear significantly the cost of the education. But above all, I think we need to also begin to see the purpose of universities more towards getting who are our most important stakeholders, which are the students. In many parts of the world today, everything is centered around students first, before anything else. So we must begin to engage our students. Let our students understand that they are building a future within a framework that they also must invest. And the more they invest, the better for the system. And of course, while we also continue to now begin to point out and even agitate for the owners of the university, whether they are government or private, to provide the needed materials that, of course, they put in the university, knowing that such are really necessary if you want really quality education. So quality education for me and student-centered learning in all this, it should be around which issues we begin to agitate and get more and more autonomy and more responsibility from our stakeholders in order to make best use of our so-called autonomy. Thank you.
Okay, Professor Ibrahim Garba, you said the autonomy should be specific and put in context. In relation to what are we talking about here now?
Well, for example, now universities have been given through the current legal framework autonomy, for example, to the councils to appoint the vice chancellors and the principal officers of the university, and also control the finances of the university. So how has anybody analyzed and to what extent has this helped the universities themselves? Because if the councils of the universities, for example, are appointed by the government, who pays for everything practically, then of course you probably will mislead yourself by thinking that you are really autonomous, because one way or another, who pays the piper will dictate the tunes. And or if it is a council of a private university owned by a certain individual or groups or corporate bodies that takes care of much of what is there, of course they will do. We know even in the United States, in Britain and so on, yes, there is remarkable freedom of intellectual thoughts, but still the country regulates certain aspects that the universities must also conform, especially when you want to draw grants and subventions from the government itself. So that means what I'm saying is now is, for example, one of the things that we want to see in full autonomy is the ability of universities to determine the criteria for admitting their students, to determine which courses they want to run and how. But you know, in today's Nigeria and in many countries, there are also an umbrella regulatory body, for example, that controls the national aspiration in terms of access to the education from diversity of our country, and of course also the National Universities Commission that knows the philosophy of the education Nigeria wants to give and control the standards of the education. So if you leave each university, for example, to determine its own standards, to determine the kind of students they will admit, I mean, you will have many countries in one country, I believe. So that's what I'm saying. It has to be specific, and it has to be one at a time as we develop and grow. The concept of university education in our developing countries cannot be certainly at a par with the concept and the stage of the higher education, for example, in the developed world. Even then, we know that what I'm saying is that even then, they don't have this total or full autonomy. We have had information or news whereby in best universities like Harvard and MIT in the United States, where the government also monitors scientists that are doing some particular research. And this is even intellectual engagement. People are doing research to promote knowledge, but the government is very wary and is following to see to what extent is that research affecting the national security or national question or whatever it is, or the global politics and what have you of that country. So that's why I'm saying that it has to be specific and then evolve gradually one at a time.
Professor Ibrahim Garba, thank you very much for your explanation. As you have indicated, and then your other brother professors have also said, the aspects relating to university autonomy are variegated. There are many. One of the latest examples you cited now of course, has to do with academic freedom. And then there are boundaries usually beyond which you cannot go. If you, for instance, you're talking about national security, there are also ethical issues that govern that. But our principal focus, to narrow it down, relates more to how to ensure better governance of our public university system. Better governance. As you said, with respect to when we say that, oh, we are a federal, we're a republic, let's say a federation, and in the meantime, you are having many instances of unitary practices and so on and so forth, that tension that arises, how do we resolve those tensions? Now, let me ask the question specifically. What is the role of governing councils today? How can that role be enhanced such that universities, or public universities to be more specific, are not just another set of parastatals? How can they generate more revenue so that some of these issues that ASU normally will go on strike over and about can be taken care of within university system themselves, always rather than boiling over and then getting to the national table. And if we say that governing councils are in charge, governing councils are the employers of university staff, why don't you pick quarrels every now and then with the federal government?
Yeah, I think you are very right. I think for me, we need to look inwards. The universities have to live up to what they are supposed to be. Think and strategize and see how they navigate through difficult situations of any kind. If you look at the governing councils themselves, they are populated by people that are appointed by government. Of course, government will put people that they want or they are interested in or that are patrons to that government. So in any case, whoever comes to present government, that governing council will certainly come with the mindset that yes, they will protect government interest and ensure good value for the government that is funding these universities. Now, internally, the people that populate the council, because there are more internal members of a university in any particular university government council than the external members. But then, even the internal dynamics, the internal members are always dictated by the dynamics of the internal mechanisms of that system. Politics of the local university is also too important or very important, whereby you may probably find universities that have certain so-called kingmakers or godfathers that still determine who gets into the university governing council from the vast population of the academic staff. It's not the most intelligent people that gets into the governing council. It's not the most politically minded people, most experienced. So you find sometimes the internal representation is also weak or is there but devoid of any idea as to move that university forward beyond certain beliefs or dogmas or self-interest of some parts of the university community. So even the recruitment mechanism of the internal representation is also as bad as the recruitment from the government side. So that's why maybe sometimes, and when you put two minds together like that, and maybe some of the people coming from government have no appreciation or no experience of the university system, even though the law says there should be people that are familiar with the university system. And then you have people from the internal sources that have little or no idea about how government external system operate. So what you get is a long time spent on trying to reconcile, trying to even have a common front on any issue. You find that an issue tabled in any governing council will first have been determined by a group, whether it's external or internal, and then come and contest for those arguments, sometimes for the good of the system, but other times are just for selfish ends. So even the universities themselves they must be seen to be reservoirs of wisdom and knowledge, so that when arguments come out of the university, it should be seen to be really a thought out and a logically sound position that even the people in government will have no reason not to accept. But once we make weak arguments from the system, or we find ways through which we are also behaving as bad or even worse than the people that we are fighting for, then sometimes it puts us in a very, very weak position to continue to agitate and convince the public that we serve to understand where we are and help us in the agitation to make the system even better for everybody. So the point I'm making here is that we need a lot of internal reformations to really begin to see our universities are contributors to development. We hear people now telling us that as the more we agitate government to give us more funding, what are we giving in return? The students who produce, we know what they are. What research are we making that is impacting society? And so on and so forth. So the moment we are not meeting these other obligations from our own end, it would put us in a very weak position to begin to now look at the other parties, other stakeholders, to say that they are not also fulfilling their own responsibility to the system. So it takes both sides to be, in my opinion, to really begin to reform the system for better service delivery. Thank you.
All right, you are watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll continue with the conversation.
Are you aware that your perfect family may be under threat by germs? Germs can cause infectious disease. These infectious diseases are amongst the biggest killers of adults and children. Illness-causing germs are everywhere. In unclean bathing water, on your clothes, dirty surfaces, on cuts and wounds. To protect your family from germs, use the power of Dettol's 1 capful. In your bathing water, for your laundry, for surface cleaning, for first aid, and to protect your family from up to 100 illness-causing germs, be Dettol sure.
The counsel of our fathers.
My advice to these young people is please do not take us back to those harrowing days. You probably do not know what it is.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together.
Nigerians, elections are here again. Let us shun violence. Let us play the game according to the rules. Do not be a thug. Say no to violence. Let's rise and defeat violence, crime, and sabotage against the peace of our nation. Nigeria is the only country we have. We must do everything to keep it united. We must avoid any act that promotes hate and disintegration. Say no to separatist movement, terrorism, fake news, hate speech, religious bigotry, and any act that tends to divide us as a nation. Watch out for strange gatherings and suspicious movements. Restrict access to sensitive documents and data, the disclosure of which may damage national security. Educate your staff and family, particularly on measures to safeguard information and report security breaches. Apply relevant legal security guidelines to protect yourself and your neighbors. Due to misinformation and wrong choices, some idle persons resort to vices in their greed to get rich quick. They resort to kidnapping, killings for rituals, and other heinous crimes. Avoid wrong use of the social media. Before you broadcast that false message, think twice. Ask whether it will promote peace or violence. For safety at home, still be security conscious. Educate your household on safety tips. Report all suspicious movements and persons to the security agencies nearest to you. Be a good citizen. Be patriotic. To pass security information, please call 0813-222-2105, 0915-339-1309, 0908-837-3514, or send a mail to dssPR@dss.gov.ng. This message is from the Department of State Services, DSS.
Finally, the hero of Nigeria's democracy has arrived. He shall usher us into a new phase of development, peace, and prosperity. He is the father of the new Nigeria, His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR. Welcome to another season of giving Nigerians hope yet again. We are sure of a great future for both ourselves and generations yet unborn. We look forward to your leading us as a nation into our manifest destiny. Though the challenges against us as a people are many, we know that your leadership shall set us on the right path to our greatness. A new dawn beckons on us all, and having you as our president is a precursor to this. Thank you for believing in Nigeria. This message is from the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
Our pastors, our imams, in every church, in every mosque, please realize that in the course of praying for peaceful and transparent elections, we all have duties beyond prayers. If we want a stable society before, during, and after the elections, what should you be saying to those that worship with you? All Sundays and all Fridays, you are saddled with the responsibility of bringing up good generations. It is therefore your duty to both man and God to ensure peace all the time, no matter about elections alone. People talk to people and people listen. Talk to your followers. Make them listen to ensure peaceful 2023 elections. This message from the National Orientation Agency.
Yeah, welcome back, and you're watching Good Morning Nigeria. We've been talking about the autonomy of Nigerian universities, and we'll have our guest here in the studio, and as the program begins to wind down, we will be asking them some fundamental questions that they will be giving answers to. Prof, if the universities get full autonomy, what guarantees that the powers given to it will not be abused?
Like Professor Garba mentioned, within the context of your regulatory authority, autonomy is guided. It's never full. You know, I've always said we need to rethink the philosophy of university education in this country. We have not done so in a very long time. The fundamental dynamics of our development, you know, has put into place some questions that we need to answer as far as the role of our university education is concerned. You know, full autonomy, the way it is understood in certain climes, will always be contextualized. You never allow anybody to run riot, as it were. You know, so the regulatory body will define the parameters on which that authority should work. Where we have now is between the regulatory body, NUC, you know, and all the plethora of bodies that are available, the parameters that enable the university to play their role in society, to function within the governance environment that they should function, and in consonance with global best practice, does not exist. That is the point we are trying to make. The universities themselves will be self-regulatory because they have their own level of structures, from the faculty, from the department to the faculty, faculty to senate, senate to management, management to council. These are all self-regulatory mechanisms to ensure that one person does not do a different thing, you know. And then, of course, you have, like Prof said, which is very, very important, which is something that we don't do very well, student-centered university development. To what extent are students in the fore of all our operations? Because it is the learning outcomes of these students that determine what transits into the rest of society. So all those will form part of the regulatory framework that will help insulate this autonomy that we are talking about from abuse.
Oh, okay, thank you. I was just wondering, Professor Aneke, if you're still there with us via Zoom. Professor Aneke, if we can see you, all right, so that's evidence that the Zoom connection is superb still. What do we make of the existing autonomy, and how can we improve on it? Earlier, we had identified at least 3 major impediments: internal inconsistencies in the principal legislation and amending legislation establishing the public universities. We also talked about the impact of subsidiary legislation, circulars, and so on and so forth, and more importantly, the role of third-party agencies such as Federal Character Commission, for instance, and the regulatory bodies for the number of professions that will seek to also dictate to the universities on how they are run. And in the meantime, you have the superstructure of the NUC, which superintends public and private universities around the country. Are they having too many masters to report to?
Thank you. I don't think they're having too many masters to report to. One philosopher says it's where man is free, but everywhere in chains. And the chains are the structures of control that you have. I do not also think that autonomy means lack of control or absence of control. As long as we're in society, we experience also controls because freedom ends where my own freedom begins, as we know. So it's not a matter of these structures of being too many. It's a matter of clarification of the boundaries. The boundaries have to be properly defined. That's exactly the point. The challenge before us now is the ASU strike. And it's about financial autonomy. Of course, the governing council raised that. The 2 professors, my colleagues, have raised that issue of governing council and self-determination. But we must actually be more focused on this, because I think that's actually why we are brainstorming on this topic, on this theme. Financial autonomy of universities is very important to me, and we must also, as Professor Chair said, determine what Nigeria actually needs. What's the manpower? What's the cost of the manpower? And how the university can generate the cost and all that. This is very, very important that the universities get financial autonomy. How this autonomy is guaranteed within the university, as far as the Chief said, has already been, there is a structure in place to actually ensure that once the financial autonomy is guaranteed, this is not abused. You have the internal capacity, internal mechanism in each university to control this. So how does this happen? I think that should be our major concern, not whether we have too many controls, because I believe that these controls can be clarified so that the boundaries are properly defined. But the issue now is how universities, especially federal universities, can achieve a modicum of financial autonomy. Determine how many students they can have, what the cost is, and who pays the cost. If government is not prepared to pay the cost of the students, then parents have to pay. Someone has to pay. There's nowhere in the world where education is free, because somebody is paying. The question now is who pays? Well, federal government cannot be a dog in the manger in this matter. You don't want to pay, and you don't want the university to look for the money and all that. This is very important to me, because when you look at what is happening, we don't even calculate the psychological cost of the stay at home. We're just concerned at home. So bring these young people back to campus again.
State government parastatal. So where is the autonomy? That's the governing councils and the proprietor of federal public universities, in this case the federal government, to see that since funding, at least to a considerable extent, is a challenge now, what can be done to ramp up funding, and then, well, of course, once you wrap up funding, we are also talking about internal controls, because we hear that there's some level of indiscipline and unaccountability for funds, even in the university system.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think what we first need is planning. Planning from top to bottom. I give an example. You see, this is a country where you wake up today, somebody will stand up in the National Assembly and proclaim that he wants a university in his local government, and so be it. Or the government itself will just wake up one day and say they want 6 more universities of such and such distributed in such and such places. I mean, who sat down to plan what these universities will be, how they'll be funded, how do you get the manpower, the facilities for them to function? So it's like we don't understand, or we don't take this higher education thing to be something that will need a lot of thinking and planning and strategy to put in place. This idea of national distribution of things in this country, that you bring universities, distribute to them geopolitical goals, you bring universities to states, you bring, and no planning on ground, for goodness sake. So you now send people to go and manage these universities and then have no clue of how to really go about it. So even within this university system itself, I give an example now. If in a university like Ahmadu Bello University, when I was in office, the government will appropriate about 150 million naira overhead for the year. Rarely do we get 80 to 90 million release over the year. And they come not regularly. They come maybe 2 months no release, another month 20 million, another month 10 million, 30, 15, like that. So this does not allow you to plan, because that is the main source. The students pay substantially. If, for example, I give you an example in Ahmadu Bello University, that in any 1 year, our students' fee collection will amount to about 2 billion naira, given the current rates. Now, the government, on the other hand, is putting about 11 billion to pay our salaries for the year, because ABU, at least when I was in office, was taking about 1.2 billion naira for salary every month. So you can imagine how much more will you ask the students to pay that will in any way begin to even cater for, if you give autonomy, for example, the salaries of staff. That is one thing. But the government comes along with, in my opinion, with a lot of intervention. You see, we don't seem to take like third fund intervention as funding. We don't take central bank intervention as funding. We don't take NPC intervention as funding. No, they are funding, because they provide things that you use money to buy. But the lack of planning is such that when those interventions come that probably were never thought of, then we cannot manage it. Let me give an example. TED fund interventions. TED fund intervention comes every year to universities. What do we use them for? Building. Yet there is no money to maintain the buildings, no money to supply power, no money to supply water. So can't we plan that we have had enough of buildings? For how long can we continue to build, to build structures? At the same time, the government also does not have control much about the intake of students. Every year, 1.2 million, 1.7 million aspire to go into universities, and we have to cater for them within the spaces available. Of course, we end up taking only 1/3 of those students. Even those 1/3 that are taken, believe me, if you go nitty-gritty, you will find it's probably 1/3 of them that, believe me, essentially ought to be in the university. Or being in the university will actually be helpful to their aspiration in life. So because of this lack of planning of the strategy of higher education in Nigeria, that everybody wants to go into the university and get that degree certificate, no matter the value of that certificate. So fundamentally, if the education philosophy, the policy allows this haywire thing, I may say, that there is no real control about, like my colleague was saying, how many doctors do you produce and from where in every given year? How many engineers? How many this? How many that? I was once opportune to go to university to accredit my own professional course, geology. And I found 300 students in a class. So I asked the vice chancellor, why do you take 300 students in a class of geology? How will you teach them in the field? He said, no, we have to understand that the people from this area, or every person wants to read geology because of oil industry. I said, do you know how many people the oil industry takes in a year? I said, not more than 10 in the whole country. So how do you now subject 300 students from only your university with others to go and compete for little position? Or if you don't work in the extractive sector, industry, you are useless. It's better we train you as a biology, physics, chemistry teacher, where there are great demands in our secondary school to teach. But this lack of planning has left everybody to do what he wants in the country, and by so doing, whatever you bring is as good as the paper you put on it, as long as there is no planning that is acceptable. Work in parallel, to be honest, in this country. So we should expect that when they work in harmony, and we have a national agenda or philosophy to pursue, then trickle it down to the universities. And even the universities now will have to imbibe that kind of approach and planning, because, to be honest with you, all universities in the world reflect the character of the society within which they are built. The universities will attempt to change the character of that society probably, but in more times than the external forces that change the university, so that the university will begin to behave like the external, the outside society, and if it is sometimes even worse, probably because of probably this idea of universities that have a lot of freedom to do. And I'm here thinking that, look, have we agitated? Do we have problem with actually limitation of freedom of thought? We don't. Look, has any lecturer in Nigerian university been arrested by government by saying what he said from his research or from his thinking? No. And I think that's the number one freedom, autonomy in the concept in universities. Freedom of the intellectual discourse in research and so on. And I don't think we have this. What we have more is the lack of the capacity to actually even do that. That should be our obligation to society.
Professor Ochefu, and this relates to the reporting lines that I talked about. I asked Professor Anyeke, and he said, look, there aren't too many reporting lines, but you seem to have a contrary view. Mm-hmm. For instance, the Vice Chancellor or who is a member of the Governing Council, are there too many reporting lines that are destructive to efficient management of the universities? Very briefly.
There are too many reporting lines. The average Vice Chancellor of a federal university will need to report to at least 12 federal institutions while in office, from the regulatory bodies to the National Assembly committees, at least 4 major committees in the National Assembly at the level of the Senate and the government, to Office of the Accountant General, to Office of the Auditor General, to Office of the Head of Service, to Federal Character Commission. All these bodies write letters on a daily basis to federal vice chancellors to do this, to do that. So there are too many reporting lines that are distractive to the federal universities. The vice chancellor of the federal university is always on the road. Rather than focusing on looking for money for his university, is on the road reporting to all these agencies that I've listed here, which is not healthy at all.
Okay, Professor Yakubu Abokio, Chairman, Secretary General Committee of Vice Chancellors of Nigerian Universities, and also Secretary General Committee of Pro-Chancellors of Nigerian Federal Universities. Thank you so much for your insight into the topic.
Thank you very much.
Continuous conversation.
It is a continuous conversation.
And from our Benin studio, we were joined by Professor Ibrahim Garba, former Vice Chancellor, Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria. Thank you so much for coming, and good morning, Nigeria. And via Zoom, we are joined from Enugu by Professor Christian Aneke. He is the Vice Chancellor of Godfrey Okoye University in Enugu. Thank you so much for coming on Good Morning, Nigeria.
Okay, that's it for us on Good Morning Nigeria today. We appreciate your being with us. Join us again tomorrow for a fresh package of the program, same time, 7 in the morning. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Juma Yusuf. Do have a wonderful day.
Latest entrant, latest technology. Welcome to Intel 4G LTE Advanced and experience super fast internet access today. Visit intel.com.ng or any of our stores in Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt to get started. Intel. Live more.
Would you like to drive in the rain?
It depends on the velocity of the rain.
From dusk to dawn, 24 hours a day, NTA International is with you in your living room, office, everywhere and anywhere. We provide the company you desire in terms of balanced and up-to-date news, programs, and the best of entertainment. Tune in to DSTV channel 251, GoTV channel 91, Freeview UK channel 264, or you can download www.visiontv.co.uk. App for iOS or Android. You can also see us on Facebook and YouTube for quality content on the go. NTA International, Africa's window to the world.
This is the network service of the NTA.
Our elders say, worries hurt and make a person waste more than sickness does. Do you doubt that? Put in modern terms, worries would lead to a lot of things. Things that do not need to be in the body. And even the doctors have come to say that worries, high anxiety and so on can lead to things like headaches, heart conditions, just to mention but a few. And if worries, anxiety are not properly treated, what next? They could lead to depression. They could lead to anxiety. And our elders from way back have already said these particular things that the doctors have come to know. And they have said, he who swims in worry drowns in sickness. You hear that? He who swims in worries drowns in sickness. But come on, am I saying that a lot of the things we worry about are not worth worrying about? No, that's not what I'm saying. Because all those things we worry about actually are very, very important things. We're talking about things like our health, maybe school fees, house rent, single people want to get married, the married ones, some of them want to leave their marriage, you name it. So you see, each person has a very, very legal ground to continue to worry about anything they've come to worry about. But there is a Hebrew proverb that says, anxiety breaks a man's backbone. Yes, it does. It makes the heart sick, makes you see things that do not even exist. And the Swedish people will tell you that. Worry gives a small thing a big shadow. And funny enough, I've come to realize something that Mark Twain said a very long time ago, to be very correct, and I'll be quoting him right now. He said, I have had a lot of worries in my life, most of which never happened. So you think about it. A lot of the things that we worry about, our elders have come to say may never actually happen. But we have pressure everywhere. And so sometimes you find very young people dropping down, just dying like that. Basically, some of those things are triggered by anxiety. Is it worth it? Is it worth dying over? For our elders have come to say again, it is he who frowns that carries a tired, heavy face about. It is true. It is the wisdom of our elders to advise us that we should take it easy. We worry about material things. We want to make it. We want to blow. But remember, when it does happen, you're not going to sleep in more than one small corner in that house or one small corner on your bed. So think about it. For our elders have said, we can never carry the world out of the world when we die. So, our thought for the week. Let's make it a challenge. Think about everything you've worried about. If you can remember all of them, maybe pick one or two. Write them down. And also write by it how those matters eventually got resolved. And then add, did the things you worry about those things actually happen? Think about it, my friend, because worry is like a war that is going on in the heart, in the mind. Now that we know that it kills, let us try. For our elders have said, the war a man has known something about cannot take the life of his child. Take care of yourselves, my friends. My name is Cordelia Obey. Bye-bye.
On the show today, we discuss the underrated link between interior design and aromatherapy with Dream Home's creative director. From the first ever AMVCA runway to the stunning red carpet, the 8th edition brought back-to-back fashion hits. The designer behind Keto Couture reflects on a decade in the industry. And then it's off duty with Jefferson. Interior design is developed primarily with the sense of sight in mind, but this lifestyle brand is using carefully curated fragrances to elevate the design experience.
I was born creative, but I decided to hone my skills and pursue a career in my creativity in 2015. I have drawn inspiration from all around me, then I have some creativity in me that I have put with this inspiration, and then I create amazing things.
For the last 7 years, the creative director and her team have explored the art of fine living through interior design, adding dimension and warmth to multi-purpose spaces with art, rich textures, colorful fabrics, and an expanding range of fragrances.
Dream Home has 3 subsidiaries. It has Dream Home Interiors, that's the one that makes furniture, makes furnishing. It has Dream Home Art Gallery. As you can see, we have art all around us. And then it has Dream Home Fragrances. In 2018, we launched one range. We have added to that range. We have expanded beyond reed diffusers and the sachet fragrances. Today we have room sprays, we have car diffusers added, and more in the reed diffuser collection. It's been 10 months of a very hectic process, but hectic but enjoyable. As a creative, you actually enjoy what you're doing, irrespective of how long it takes. These last 10 months, well, amazing. So let me tell you how we come about this scent. First of all, we have like a wide range of proposed scents. and then we now start to run it by individuals. Someone can just walk into the space and then we just, oh, please, can you just give us 5 minutes of your time for a survey? We have a book. We have all the proposed sense in that book, and then we have a space for your reaction. Indeed, we are all different people. I'm telling you, like, I would love 1 cent, and then let's say 60% of the people that we have recorded will tell you that, no, I don't like this. So when we do that, we now collate our results, and then we release what we feel people would like. Because I mean, if I feel I like it, I'm not the only end user. It has to appeal to the general public, and so that's why it takes back and forth. Cancel. Sometimes you cancel one fragrance, you bring it back on board, cancel it again before you settle for your finds that we had the same aim. But this new batch, we worked on them in such a way that they're even better than the previous batch. We used a wide range in this batch. We have jasmine, we have bergamot, we have peach, we have rose, green apples, orange, grapefruit. There's a lot. It's a wide range, so many. And so we divide them into notes. The way fragrances are prepared, there's a top note, there's a middle note, and there's a base note. So you might be smelling something. If it's faint, it means it's somewhere in the middle or bottom. But when something is prominent, one smell is prominent, it means it's the top note. It means it's sitting on top. There's one particular one that I really like. I have it everywhere in my own house. That is the Oriental spice. Yes, one top note there would be black pepper. That really appeals to me. I love that black. There's something about black pepper. So we have one in this batch that we called Signature. So that's our signature fragrance, and we are kind of a bit secretive about what we used to produce that one. We have put down a few of the ingredients, but we didn't put everything. So the signature, Dream Home Signature, is the one that complements. I haven't met anyone who doesn't like a good space. Not one single person. I've not heard anyone say, you know what, I want to stay in this dingy place and I'm okay. No, every single person wants a nice home, irrespective of your income. You just make the place look good. And so what we have tried to do as Dream Home is to give you your dream home. So we create furniture and furnishing that makes your space to stand out. We put art on the wall, on the floors, to give it the unique touch, and then we make sure that space smells divine. So you go out all day to work, and then the moment you open your door and you walk in, you're walking into your dream home. You're walking into heaven, your personal heaven.
She likes dash. She likes dash.
One of the most exciting dates on Africa's fashion calendar is the Africa Magic Viewers' Choice Awards. Informed by years of glamour, the event's red carpet is an opportunity for celebrities to present themselves in decadent and statement-making looks that highlights their best features. Arriving in bright and bold colors, creative silhouettes, jaw-dropping necklines, and gowns with floor-length hems, all of this year's AMVCA nominees and attendees showed up dressed to impress. No doubt, there's never a shortage of high-octane glamour each year on the AMVCA red carpet, creating major moments with creativity and style. Among a plethora of designer gowns and bespoke suits, each red carpet finds a number of celebrities earn themselves a place in African fashion history and on the coveted Best Dressed list. Looking through the evening's best and boldest outfits provides a concise overview of how important it was for each celebrity to make their mark in this year's Best Dressed category. elegant yet individualistic, these are our best dressed stars at the 2022 AMVCA Awards. Coming in at number 3, we have Etim Effiong and Bonang Mathiba. Etim wore a dapper suit from Deji and Kola, while Bonang Mathiba stunned in a pink sequin and feather gown designed by Sheye Oladejo. Coming in at number 2, we have Timini Ibusen and Idia Asian.
The word fashion for me is passion.
For roughly a decade between the early and mid-2000s, Hito Couture was one of the biggest Nigerian fashion brands to gain international visibility, showcasing on runways in New York and Paris, and grooming a crop of models and designers. The creative director opens up on the history of her clothing line and her impact in the industry.
I asked myself that question. How come did I do so well in fashion? Because that question was asked by a foreign journalist in Paris. And it's exciting that I found myself in fashion. And I used to go to a designer. I don't want to mention the designer's name. I used to sketch for them. When I go, I sketch. I love sketching. And before you know it, one of the tailors asked me, do you know you're the one making my model to survive? I say, how? Do you know your sketches are the one that she uses to do for other customers? I say, what? She said, why don't you just go into fashion? I said, no, I don't have the time. In oil and gas, I cannot do it. He said, no, that I should do it. That I have the passion. He has seen it in me, that my styles are different, that I should. I said, so how do I start? He said, don't worry, I will tell you how to start. Today, the guy gave me I gave him an appointment. He came to see me. He talked about it, and that's how I started. I was saying, how do I get the equipment? He told me what equipment to get and everything. I said, but tell us for example. He said, don't worry, madam, you will do it. He hired me. And today, I'm a household name. My mom is my inspiration. She's a fashionable lady. May her soul rest in peace. And I got a lot of styles from her. She's very detailed. Sometimes when we dress as young girls, you're not matching well. You know, those are exciting things that is amazing about motherhood. My mother, she's really my mentor. Everywhere I go, I talk about her. She's very classy. She's very unique. And I've took that style from her as I'm growing up as a young lady. People that know me know I've always been fashionable and have a different sense of fashion. I tell people it's not when you dress naked, it means that you are fashionable. No. I believe that every woman should be adorable. That word adorable makes you a fashionable person. And you look at yourself in the mirror. That's why you have the mirror. You look at yourself. Am I really looking good? Is this jewelry goes with the clothes I'm wearing? Those are the things that really make the difference. Because I was able to infuse the African fabric into the Western fabric. I think I'm one of the first designers in Nigeria. Even the woman with the tummy, we can hide it. You know, so I was able to do things. I blew up at that time. That's within Nigeria, because Lagos is the hub of fashion. I was able to go to Lagos and defeat them. In 2016, I won the best couture in Nigeria. You know, all the top celebrities won other awards, but I was able to do that. You know, so, and a lot of guys who are into fashion saw this woman is going somewhere. And two, when I started my international runways and all those stuff, I knew that I was out for this game, so I carved a niche for myself.
Jefferson Obusiri is the Nigerian model, well on his way to becoming one of the most sought-after faces in the industry. Since his debut in 2018, the 26-year-old has graced the runways of Milan, Spain, Paris, and London, appearing in editorials for some of the world's most coveted brands, including Ferragamo, Versace, and Thom Browne.
Well, firstly, I never wanted to be a model. I studied oil and gas engineering and I wanted to be an oil and gas engineer. But as fate may have it, after school I was waiting for service and I joined School of Modeling and I got scouted by my mother agency. I got placed in Europe, I had to travel, stuff like that. And since then, I would say my career has really progressed in a positive manner. Especially after the whole COVID lockdown, because it really affected a lot of models, especially models from Africa. But I'm grateful for where I am right now and I thank God for everything. I would say my biggest modeling accomplishment is my campaign for Unique Look, because the Worldwide campaign, my pictures were all over Paris, London, China, Jack model to have a campaign worldwide. First runway experience was for my daily show, and that was for Salvatore Ferragamo, and my most recent show there was for Salvatore Ferragamo. I would say in terms of confidence, because I don't like to be outspoken, even if I have something on my mind. But as a model, the fact that you have to walk in front of like a large crowd and you don't have to like show any sign of fear, even though you're shaking, it really helps build my confidence, like confidence-wise. So I would say my confidence. It's just the way I am. Salvatore Ferragamo, because definitely you're like taking my debut show. I love your designs. It's classic. It's unique. Secondly, second designer would be Louis Vuitton. Looking out loud. Who doesn't like Louis Vuitton? Okay, we have next one would be Versace. Who doesn't like Versace? Versace is very cool. Everybody dreams of wearing Versace. Next one would be Gucci. Gucci money. Yeah, Gucci is classic, is unique, is luxury. It's everything you want. Then one would be for a Cold War. A Cold War is one of my favorite brands because it's owned by a black designer and it has some unique streetwear looks, and I definitely love streetwear looks. I'll see jackets. I love jackets. Any kind of jackets. Winter jacket, jean jacket, denim jackets, all sorts of jackets. I love wearing jackets. I don't have a skincare routine because I have good skin thanks to my mom. But all I do is basically wash my face every morning and night before I go to bed. For health and fitness, I do work out once in a while, but I rarely work out because staying fit is not really hard for me. The model I look up to is Alpha Zia, simple and short. It's a black male model. When I did my debut show, he was there and he advised me on what to do next time, not to do this mistake again. So since then, we've been talking and I really look up to him. The challenges we face in the show, I face in the industry, it's the fact that I'm a black model, and being a model also is not easy because of the fact of racism, stuffs, a lot. So Those are the two things I actually face in the industry. Like, things I don't like, the problems we face in the industry as Nigerians or black male models. Yeah, my favorite feature of my portfolio, it's social media shots I did for Versace backstage during their show, which is used on their website for their men's accessories. So that's the favorite picture of my portfolio currently. Yes, I get to travel a lot. Since I'm a model, I have to travel from one country to another because I have different agencies in Spain, Milan, Paris, Italy, Amsterdam, and Sweden. But the most exciting place I've been to recently was Spain and Mallorca because I did a campaign there, and it was an island on its own inside Spain. It was so beautiful, so classic. So it's just, they have a lot of trees, mountains. It was so beautiful, and I loved it. There are two things people will be surprised to learn about me. Is the fact that I'm a geek. I'm a geek when it comes to computers and like Japanese animations, and the fact that, and also my age. People are always surprised at my age. Most people think I'm like 18, 20, 23, but surprisingly I'm 26, and they're always shocked to find out I can't be 26. I had to show them my ID most of the time. Like, oh look, I'm 26. The inspiration for my modeling career is actually to be one of the best male models in the world, and coming from Africa and Nigeria, because we don't have a top male model known around the world from Nigeria. So I want to be like a male model from Nigeria, from Africa, in the industry that is well known, that people can actually look up to. Very simple. A t-shirt, plain trousers, or joggers and some slides. I love to do it simple.
Nigeria is a land blessed with abundant and diverse heritage resources from its numerous ethnic roots. These heritage resources were created from human interactions with the environment. Consequently, they have become a source of cultural identity and national pride. Today, the term cultural heritage has changed content considerably. Cultural heritage does not end at just tangible heritages, such as monuments and collection of objects. It also includes intangible heritages.
Intangible cultural heritage has to do with people's practice, skill, and cultural expressions that are not easily physically available, but there's something which it has to do, which is intellectually embedded, in the ethos and values of the people.
Ice Age is a living culture. It's about me and you, what we do daily. Our customs, our values, our idiosyncrasies, our food, the way we behave, and all that. So it's what we call living culture. Our day-to-day activities. It's about humanity.
As a result of its significance, Nigeria is committed to abiding by the spirit and the letters of the 2003 UNESCO Convention for the Safeguarding